The best strategy for figuring out visitors from humans will actually make you lose the game.
Hey, buddy. Are you alone?
No.
Oh, that's too bad. I baked you some cookies.
Oh, really? I mean, really?
Yeah, they're right here in my back pocket.
Nah, never mind. I don't want them.
What? I thought we had a whole thing. You let me in, you get cookies for being lonely.
Now, who do you think I am? Like, I'm not about to fall for the oldest trick in the book. The old cookies in the back pocket trick.
What?
Yeah, been there, done that. Nah, I got a party full of people up in here and FEMA's about to show up, so, goodbye.
But they're double stuffed Oreos.
Come on in. What is up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Animated Cartoon Conspiracy Theory, where the game that's on everybody's minds happens to be No, I'm Not a Human. And this game has a whole lot of people thinking. But what kind of game would it be if it wasn't published by the same people that made Mouthwashing or Buckshot Roulette? Like, Critical Reflex has to be one of the best publishers for making these dark games, or at least like seeing the ones that work. But you know what else is a Critical Reflex? You hitting that subscribe button and probably hitting that like button, because this video could use all that it can get. But No, I'm Not a Human is another one of these imposter deduction games where you have to figure out who is real and who is fake in order to let them into your house. Like, this game is very similar to other games like That's Not My Neighbor, a similar game where you have to keep out the monsters and let in only the humans, no matter how weird that they look. But let me ask you, what's the best strategy for figuring out the human versus a visitor? Especially in a game like No, I'm Not a Human, where looks don't matter. Because everybody looks weird, everybody has a cohesive story, and everyone can't pass the tests. So today, Overthinkers, we're going to be going over the best strategy for figuring out visitors from humans. So make sure you save this video for later, share it with a friend, and of course hype it so others can see it just like you. Now, the setting of No, I'm Not a Human takes place in a world where the sun has basically overheated, causing the summer to be extra hot, and people from underground, known as visitors, coming to the surface and pretending to be human. And because everybody is looking for a place to stay in the unbearable heat and the collapse of society, visitors and humans alike try to seek home in your place of stay. And at the very beginning of the game, your best friend tells you that you have to let at least one real person inside. That is because somebody known as the Pale Visitor is stalking people's homes and trying to see if they can squeeze in with the rest of the fake visitors. But what if I told you figuring out an imposter is easy and just as complicated as the game would have it seem? Firstly, we should probably go over the strategy that is most commonly used by everybody that's played the game. Now, every night you're confronted with guests who try to come inside of your house. They talk to you, they plead with you, they actually beg to be let inside. And your job is simple: hear them out and choose to let them inside or not let them inside. But remember, some of them are actually monsters, so how can you tell the difference between their stories? Well, the truth is that you only have a 50-50 shot of knowing, and this is just a statistical fact. For example, we can take one of the confirmed visitors that will always be a visitor no matter when you play, because all of the visitors are randomized. So the same person can pop up and be a visitor or a guest, but there are a select few who will always be visitors no matter what. They also seemingly have the most convincing story. One of these visitors happens to be the cashier girl. She's recognizable by her bob cut and her disfigured shoulder. Her story happens to be one of the most heartfelt, saddest stories that you encounter in the game. Now, she barely remembers anything about her past, which should be a sign, but most everybody in this game can't remember things about their past, just because of how traumatic their life is. But she tells us her home was invaded by a group of men, which she assumed were visitors. And unfortunately, she lost her roommate in the process of escaping. But even worse, two visitors took advantage of her before she was able to escape. But when she's able to stay inside of your house, she starts to try to remember her past but can't remember anything. And the more you ask her questions, the more you realize that she is actually a visitor. And she herself comes to this conclusion that all of her memories have been fake, and the whole time she's been living a lie. She directly serves as a reminder for the protagonist to be careful of who they let in, and not just to trust simple stories that they tell them. So if you can't trust anything that any of your guests say, how can you know for sure that they are a visitor? Well, the truth is that humans are pretty bad at detecting lies, like so bad that it makes you question whether you're being lied to right now. For example, only about 54% of people can figure out if they're being lied to with basic facts and lies. That means on average, you have about a 4% chance of detecting a lie than a coin flip. But there are people that are very good at detecting lies off rip. And these people are known as truth wizards. I'm not joking, that's actually a name for these people that are good at detecting lies. Now, while the title of truth wizard is pretty cool, I think I'd be down with being a wizard of any kind. Spillatronus! That's wizard speak for hit that subscribe button. But the reason why our truth wizards are able to tell truth from lies better than the rest of people is because of their ability to be able to detect small movements in the face, meaning that they're just simply relying on micro expressions. People kind of move and twitch their face based on what they're talking about and saying. And relying on these small cues of micro expressions allows them to be able to detect whether a person is lying more accurately than others. And funny enough, this is a similar tactic that the CIA actually teaches most of its operatives. And this actually comes from ex-CIA operatives as well as people who run lie detector tests. The first thing you do is that you have to establish a baseline. So you ask irrelevant questions like, how was your day? How do you feel about the sun? What's good about today's date? Asking irrelevant questions like this help to establish a baseline for their facial movements, expressions, and of course, heart rate. And it's then when you ask them the more important questions, because at this point, you figured out what their baseline is, you're able to find out their deviation from that baseline. But the thing is, this isn't foolproof either. It just makes it easier to tell if somebody's lying or not. And doing this actually increases your chances of detecting a lie from the 50-50 mark that we've discussed before. But the thing is, you can't really do that in this video game. You can't ask follow-up questions or irrelevant questions. Everybody seems to act weird about any type of question. And that ranges from somebody asking to drinking a beer and you say no, all the way down to you saying, how did you get here? And they choose not to answer. So relying on facial cues and stories might not be all that reliable. But what if you took the time to hear them out? Like, see if their story adds up. The truth is that this does make it easier to detect lies, but you don't have enough time to actually do that. See, the longer that you're able to stick around somebody, the easier it is for you to learn their baseline and then learn their deviations off of it. But also, the longer that somebody talks, the more easy it is to detect when they are actually lying. But the thing about No, I'm Not a Human is that you have a limited amount of time to talk to them, and they only talk to you for a certain amount per day. And because of in-game events, you have to let some people go or never finish their story. So hearing people out isn't necessarily a great option, but it is certainly a better option than not listening to anybody's stories at all. So while yes, theoretically you could listen to everybody's story individually, you'd probably run out of time in listening to their story because of in-game events. So if there's no point in listening to anything that people say in this game to figure out if they're a visitor or not, what should you do? That's when you realize that there are other factors that you can use in order to detect a visitor from a human. That being the tests. Now in the game, you get a whole myriad of tests, and the longer that you are able to survive, the more tests you get. And the range of tests go from white teeth, dirty fingernails, bloodshot eyes, hairless armpits, aura photographs, insects inside of your ears, bleeding gums, skin irritation, rapid pupil movement, and underarm fungus. And that right there is a laundry list of things that you have to account for when trying to detect a visitor from a human. But you know what isn't a laundry list? You hitting that notification bell. But the problem that many have pointed out, like Queso and Corey X Keshin, is that most of these tests are something normal people have, like white teeth, dirty fingernails, and airless armpits are pretty normal. Heck, even in the intro of the game, there's an ad for clean teeth. So there's no way to trust that the tests that you're supposed to use on these visitors are actually going to give you conclusive results. So a better question to ask ourselves is, which one of these tests would be the best tests? Now I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to figure out which test do you think is the best test. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, the truth is that any one test is probably the best test. And that's because having a whole multitude of tests actually makes it harder to detect who is human and who is not. Not only that, but we have to include the fact that we have a limited amount of energy per day. So it would be best to conserve your test to literally 1 or 2 so that way you can check all of the visitors. And using this tactic is known as a heuristic approach. We might be able to find the visitors faster with a catch. Now, what is heuristic psychology? Basically, it's a mental shortcut for decision making. For example, we do this with animals out in the wild. For example, like the coral snake, which happens to be a deadly snake in my area that gets confused with the milk snake. And we came up with the phrase, red against yellow, deadly fellow, red against black, friendly Jack. Using phrases like this makes it easier to know whether you have to run away or you can just keep your distance. And it's totally better than testing out your chances of getting a venomous bite. But how can we take this approach and use it to detect a visitor? We do this by only choosing one thing to test, like teeth, and only teeth. And you would be surprised, but this actually works a little too well. See, in an article published by SpringerNature.com, they cite many studies consisting of truth and lie detection. In one of the more realistic studies, people using the heuristic approach were able to find out who was telling the truth and who was lying with 79% accuracy. That means by relying on one cue instead of all the other factors, they were able to find lies 67% of the time, which is a lot higher than 54% of the time of the average. And of course, while that varies, that means that just by focusing on one little test, you can increase your chances of figuring out who's telling the truth and who is actually lying. Or in this case, who is a visitor and who is a human. And the thing is, I actually tested this in game. Yes, I purchased the game and I played it myself after watching a whole bunch of people play it. It's a pretty good game. But after only testing for teeth, what I found out is that you can figure out who is a visitor 80% of the time, just about. And the other 20% is false positives, where somebody had clean teeth and they ended up being a human. My bad. And that means during my test, I was able to reduce the amount of visitors that were actually inside of my house. And this is where we run into the problem of it working a little too well. Because if we take into account that visitors only attack humans when there's 2 or more visitors, you start running into problems. And that is because of game theory, FEMA, and the pale visitor. So the heuristic approach works very well, but the problem is that you have FEMA, which is an organization in-game that is looking for a way to find out who's a visitor and who is not. But they do so by taking your guests out of your home. And the pale visitor, one of the scariest beings in the game, will come inside of your house and end the game if you have only visitors in the home. So let's say you have about 3 people inside of your home. 2 of them are visitors and 1 of them is a human. If FEMA comes and takes 2 people, you're left with 1 person. And the chances of that person being left being a visitor is very high. So if the pale visitor comes along right after FEMA, they will come inside of your house and end the game. And if you took the initiative and tested a false positive and took out 1 of your humans, then you're left with 2 visitors inside of your house and most likely will be left with no one to protect you. So what we find out is that the best strategy in game for detecting a visitor from a human will also lead us to almost losing every single time, which means that the best bet for you to win the game is to still follow the heuristic approach, but leave more than 3 people alive, taking the chance that 1 of them may actually still be a visitor. But that's just my hypothesis. And is that a coincidence? I think not. And if you like videos like this and more, make sure you check out the Animated Cartoon Conspiracy season playlist. We got season 1, which was completed a long time ago, and now we have season 2, which is still ongoing until the end of this year. So if you want to see how this evolved into what it is today, go watch season 1 and then watch season 2. And I'll of course see you in another video. Bye-bye. Don't trust Elliot because he's not only an unreliable narrator, but he's also his own victim.
What? This isn't where I normally do theories. What did you think this was?